What if you were driving alone at night and suddenly heard a clear voice calling your name? But there was no one there. What would you do? I know what you're thinking. It sounds like something out of a cheap horror film, right? But let me tell you something it wasn't. Not that night. Not on the B1081. My name is Edward Graves, and I've been a lorry driver for over 15 years. I've driven on just about every road in this country, from busy motorways to forgotten country lanes. I always thought I knew what to expect from them, until that night. Before you jump to another video, listen to me all the way through. This story is real. It happened to me. And if it gives you goosebumps, give it a like and subscribe for more stories like this. Roads are strange places, you know. They seem so normal during the day, busy, noisy, full of life. But at night they change. It's as if the whole world disappears, and you're left alone with your thoughts and the sound of the engine. And on that particular night, as I drove along the B1081, I realized that perhaps I wasn't as alone as I thought. Have you ever heard something unexplainable while driving? Share in the comments. I need to know if I'm alone in this. The truth is, that night started like any other. I was returning home after a long delivery in Leicester. The fog was beginning to engulf the road, and the surrounding fields looked bleaker than usual. But then, something changed. Something I can't explain to this day. The road was too quiet. There were no other cars in sight, just the constant sound of my truck's tires cutting through the wet asphalt. The fog seemed to engulf everything around, turning the open fields into a grey, indistinct canvas. I'd driven along that part of the B1081 before, but I'd never felt so exposed. It was as if something was watching me from the shadows, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. That's when I heard it. My name. Clear as day, coming from nowhere. Edward? The sound was low, almost a whisper, but unmistakable. I stopped breathing for a second, my hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. I looked through the wing mirror, trying to spot anything in the darkness beyond the road. Nothing. Just the mist and the heavy silence. It must be tiredness, I muttered to myself, trying to calm my nerves. You're exhausted, Edward. That's all. But then it came again. Edward. This time it was louder, more insistent. It seemed to come from outside the lorry, perhaps from the roadside. I slammed on the brakes, reducing speed until I was almost at a complete standstill. I opened the window and shouted, "Who's there?" No reply. I got out of the lorry, my feet touching the damp ground. Each step echoed in the stillness of the night, as if the sound were amplified by the darkness itself. As I got closer to the side of the road, I noticed something strange, a dark figure standing between the trees. She was dressed in old clothes, as if she had come from another era. Her face was partially covered by a veil, but something about the way she looked at me made me feel as if I had been passed through an electric current. It wasn't a human look. It was empty, as if she wasn't really there. "Madam?" I called out, my voice trembling. She didn't answer, nor did she move. Then, as if she had been erased, she disappeared. There was nowhere to go, nothing but the dense trees behind her. I looked around, trying to find some sign, some trace of what I had just seen. But there was nothing. Absolutely nothing. I went back to the lorry, my hands trembling as I turned, the key in the ignition. This wasn't normal. It couldn't be real. But I knew, deep down, that I had seen something I couldn't explain. The silence that followed was even worse than the whispers. After I got back into the lorry, something in the air felt wrong. It wasn't just the absence of sounds, but a palpable feeling of heaviness, as if the atmosphere itself had changed. The surrounding fog seemed denser now, almost solid, swallowing up the dim headlights. My every breath echoed loudly in the cabin, as if it were being amplified by something invisible. I tried switching on the radio to distract my mind, but it didn't work. Not even a hiss. It was as if everything around me was slowly dying. The engine, the lights, even time seemed to have stopped. And then I heard it again. My name, Edward. This time the voice was inside the cabin. There was no doubt about it. It came from behind me, low and drawn out, as if it were made of smoke. I froze, my hands gripping the steering wheel. My heart was beating so hard that I could feel its pulse in my ears. Slowly, very slowly, I looked through the center rearview mirror. She was there, sitting in the back seat, as if she had been there all along. Her empty eyes stared at me, fixed, unblinking. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, and her old-fashioned dress seemed to float slightly, even without any wind inside the lorry. She didn't move, but her presence was suffocating, as if she was sucking all the air out of the cab. My throat went dry. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. Instead, I pressed the accelerator, trying to get away as quickly as possible. The engine roared, but the road in front of me seemed endless. The same gentle curve, the same dark trees in the distance. No matter how hard I drove, nothing changed. It was as if I was trapped in an endless nightmare. The whispers came again, this time louder, more insistent. They came from everywhere, filling the cabin with voices that didn't belong in this world. Some were begging, some were shouting, and some seemed to be laughing. A low, guttural sound that made my blood run cold. "What do you want?" I finally shouted, my voice failing. "What do you want from me?" But she didn't answer. She remained there, motionless, watching me, as if I were an insect caught in a web. Desperate, I started banging on the lorry doors, trying to open them, but they wouldn't budge. It was as if something invisible had sealed them. I looked through the rearview mirror again, and this time she tilted her head slightly, as if she were curious. Her lips moved, forming words that I couldn't hear but felt deep inside me. "You shouldn't be here." Those words echoed in my mind, as if they had been etched directly into my brain. I closed my eyes tightly, trying to block it out, but the feeling of absolute fear had already taken hold of me. Then I remembered something I'd heard about the B1081. They say that this road was built over an old execution ground, where prisoners were publicly hanged. They say that their spirits still roam the area, trapped between this world and the next. Others swear they have seen the Black Shuck, a supernatural creature that haunts lonely travelers. I had never believed these stories before, but that night every detail of them seemed to come alive around me. Do you believe in curses, or is it all coincidence? Share your thoughts below. I'm desperate to understand what happened to me. Finally, after what seemed like hours, the fog began to dissipate. The road in front of me cleared up, and the whispering diminished until it disappeared completely. When I looked in the rearview mirror again. The figure was gone. I parked the lorry at the first petrol station I could find and ran out, as if the devil himself was after me. I've never driven past the B1081 since. That night wasn't just a frightening encounter, it was a warning. Since then, my life has changed in ways I could never have predicted. I can no longer drive without looking in the rearview mirror every few minutes, as if I expect to see something, or someone watching me. Even the sound of the engine seems different now, as if it carries a distant echo of that voice that called my name. But that's not the worst thing. The worst thing is that I started dreaming about that road. Always the same scene. The dense fog, the dark trees in the background, and that figure standing on the hard shoulder, calling out to me. And in my dreams, I always stop. I always get out of the lorry, and I always follow her into the middle of the forest, where she disappears into a darkness so deep that it seems to swallow up everything around her. When I wake up, I'm covered in sweat, with the feeling that something is sitting at the foot of my bed, watching me in silence. I don't know why it happened to me. Maybe I went through something I shouldn't have seen. Maybe the B1081 isn't just a road, but a kind of portal to something much bigger. Something we weren't meant to understand. Or maybe I'm just going mad. But one thing's for sure, that voice is still haunting me. And do you know what's strangest? Since that night, I've started to notice little things different in my routine. A scratch on the lorry door that wasn't there before. Shadows that seem to move when no one is around. And sometimes when I'm alone in the cab, I feel a presence behind me, as if someone were sitting in the passenger seat. But when I look, there's nothing there. Have you ever felt something like this? Have you ever had the feeling that something is watching you, even when you know you're alone? If so, share your experience in the comments. I need to know if others have faced something similar. Before I close, I'd like to make a request. If this story gave you goosebumps, subscribe to my channel. Here, I share real accounts of supernatural experiences on the roads of the UK histories that will make you think twice before taking to the road at night. Give me a like if this story scared you, and share it with your friends so they can feel the chill too. Your interaction helps these stories live on. Finally, leave a comment. What would you do if you heard your name being called on a deserted road? Would you stop? Or would you keep driving, ignoring whatever was out there? I want to hear your opinions. Maybe your answer will become a part of an upcoming video here on the channel. Until next time, and remember, not everything that calls your name wants to be found.